Have you ever really truly stopped to think about the human mind? I mean, how did we even get here? Building cities, creating art that moves us to tears, imagining futures. And what if, just what if, our greatest evolutionary superpower came with a hidden, maybe even a profound, cost? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are going deep, right into the origins of human consciousness. And doing that, we're going to look at something challenging, schizophrenia, but from a really different angle. This isn't just about understanding a condition. Well, it feels like it's about understanding something core to being human. So our mission today, we're unpacking this surprising idea, this theory that schizophrenia, maybe it isn't some random biological error, maybe it's actually an unintended side effect, a kind of evolutionary price we paid for the very cognitive abilities that define us. We're going to explore how these incredible brains of ours, capable of so much, are also, well, incredibly delicate. Okay, so to really get into this story, we need to rewind. Way back. Think 7 million years ago. Picture the scene. African savanna. There's an upright ape walking around, our distant ancestor. And their brain. Pretty modest, really. Maybe only a bit bigger than a chimpanzee's brain today. But even back then, inside that skull, you could say there were the very first faint flickers, the earliest embers of what we'd eventually call the human mind. Just a hint of what was coming.
And that flicker, well, it set off this incredible biological experiment. Like nothing else, really. Over the next few million years, our ancestors' brains started expanding explosively. This wasn't some slow, gradual tweak. It was dramatic, a real acceleration. So by the time Homo sapiens arrived on the scene, maybe 300,000 years ago, our brains have basically tripled in size compared to those early ancestors. But like you said, it wasn't just about getting bigger. The key was the complexity blossoming inside, the wiring, the connections. That's where the real revolution happened.
And what an explosion of complexity, this new, bigger, more complex brain. It gave us abilities that just completely changed the game. Suddenly, we weren't just stuck in the now. We could, vividly imagine the future, plan for it. And we could clearly remember the past, learn from it. We started making tools, much more complex ones. And then, somehow, building whole civilizations. We started creating gods, telling these elaborate stories, myths to bind us together, making music, well, that resonates deep inside us. But maybe the biggest leap, the real game changer, was understanding other minds, being able to simulate what someone else might be thinking or feeling, predicting, planning our social moves, feeling empathy. That was it, wasn't it? The birth of consciousness as we really experience it.
Exactly. But what's so fascinating, and maybe a bit unsettling, is that this amazing gift, this rapid cognitive evolution, it came with risks. It was, you might say, a dangerous gift.
A dangerous gift. Okay, that's a phrase that makes you pause. When something changes that fast, evolutionarily speaking, are there built-in weaknesses? I mean, what could possibly be the downside to being so brilliant? Especially, the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex. The bits we think of as the crowning jewel. Abstract thought, language, morality, our sense of self, it all sounds like pure advantage, right?
Well, that's exactly where the potential cost comes in. Those very neural systems, the ones that let us build these complex inner worlds, navigate tricky social landscapes, construct who we are, they are incredibly fragile. And they demand so much energy, they're running hot all the time. Think of it like, a Formula One engine. Capable of amazing performance, sure, but also incredibly sensitive, finely tuned, and maybe prone to overheating or breaking down under stress.
Which brings us right to schizophrenia. When we talk about it, we mean things like hallucinations, hearing voices, seeing things others don't. Delusions, too, these really fixed false beliefs, no matter the evidence, thoughts getting jumbled up, and often this feeling that your sense of self is fractured. Now, the old view is often, it's just a terrible malfunction, a random brain glitch. But more and more research is pointing somewhere else, something deeper. Could it really be the flip side, the unintended consequence of the very traits that made us human?
Precisely. And this is really key, I think. Schizophrenia doesn't seem to be a disorder of the primitive parts of the brain, the ancient structures we share with many animals. It's a disorder of the most advanced, most recently evolved parts. The bits responsible for abstract thought, complex language, that deep social understanding. It highlights just how specialized and, frankly, precarious some of these uniquely human abilities might be. What happens when that top-level machinery goes a bit haywire?
It's kind of mind-bending to think of our brain as this beautiful, intricate, but maybe slightly unstable machine, because when you stop and think, your brain is always working, constantly. Even when you're not consciously directing it, it's running this nonstop simulation, isn't it? Building a model of the world, predicting what happens next, guessing what other people are thinking, and telling stories about you, who you are, your past, your feelings. It's an incredible balancing act, requires unbelievable precision and coordination.
Right. And in schizophrenia, that amazing machinery starts to, well, malfunction. It starts making crucial errors in these really basic fundamental processes. So, for instance, the system that normally distinguishes between your own inner voice and someone else speaking, it might glitch. Suddenly, your own thoughts feel like they're coming from outside, auditory hallucinations. Or the brain tries to make sense of confusing signals, unusual perceptions, by creating a narrative, even if that narrative is a delusion, a false belief. It's like the brain loses its mooring in shared reality. The line between internal and external blurs, and maybe broken isn't quite the right word. Maybe it's more like overheating. The most sophisticated parts are spinning out of control, generating their own reality.
That idea of overheating, it connects to something I've heard about, which sounds really interesting, maybe even a bit spooky. You mentioned the brain getting signals crossed. Is there a specific cognitive function, maybe one that's usually super helpful, that just goes into overdrive in schizophrenia? I think I've seen it called the over-mentalizing hypothesis. What's that about?
Ah, yes. That's a really compelling idea. So mentalizing is our ability to understand that other people have minds with intentions, beliefs, emotions. We read people. It's absolutely crucial for navigating the social world. We're incredibly good at it most of the time.
Okay, so we're good at guessing intentions.
Exceptionally good. But the hypothesis suggests that in schizophrenia, this system becomes too active. It runs away with itself. It starts attributing intentions, complex motives, hidden meanings, where there just aren't any. It's over-interpreting social cues or even random events.
Wow. So the very tool that allows us to connect deeply with others, if it gets cranked up too high, it generates paranoia, isolation.
Exactly. It's not random madness. It seems to be runaway cognition, a specific system going into hyperdrive.
And that explains so much, doesn't it? Paranoia, the feeling someone's out to get you. Delusions of reference, thinking a news report or a song is secretly about you. And even hearing voices. And maybe that's the brain overinterpreting its own internal chatter as external agents trying to communicate. A hypersocial brain misfiring.
Precisely. And this kind of misfiring, this hyperactive social cognition, often leads to one of the most profound and disturbing aspects of schizophrenia, the disruption of the self. People describe feeling like their thoughts aren't their own anymore, like they're being inserted from outside, or feeling that their body isn't really theirs, or that they're being controlled by some external force, like a puppet.
And there's the deep irony again, isn't it? That kind of experience, that feeling of yourself dissolving or being controlled. It's only possible because humans have such a complex, integrated sense of self to begin with. So what does that tell us? How does that shift how we think about this?
Well, connecting it to the bigger evolutionary picture, it helps explain why we don't see schizophrenia in, say, chimpanzees or dolphins. It's not because their brains are healthier. It's because they likely don't have the specific high-level cognitive architecture, that complex sense of self, that sophisticated ability to model other minds for this particular kind of disruption to even occur. You can't really lose your sense of self or feel it's fragmenting if you never constructed one in quite the same way we do.
Right, you can't break what isn't built like that in the first place. So looking at it through this lens, schizophrenia starts to look less like a conventional disease and more like maybe a cognitive side effect, a potential vulnerability inherent in having a brain powerful enough to dream, imagine, believe, and create a sense of I am. It sounds like a testament to both the power and the fragility of our consciousness.
Which really forces us to ask a difficult question, doesn't it? What if? What if the people we've often labeled as mad or crazy, what if they aren't simply ill in the way we usually think of illness, but are actually, in some sense, overwhelmed? Overwhelmed by the very cognitive capacities that define our species.
Yeah, what if schizophrenia isn't just an error, but an echo, a kind of haunting echo of how fast our species' cognitive abilities evolved, like the growing pains of a brain that maybe, for some, evolved almost too fast, too far, became too complex to remain stable under all conditions. And the people living with this intense cognitive reality, they so often carry that burden in silence, marginalized, misunderstood, treated as other, living with a mind that's simultaneously this incredible human marvel and a source of immense suffering.
And it's so crucial, I think, to remember, they are not other. They are us. They experience the world differently, yes. They think, feel, perceive in ways that can be hard to grasp. But that's because they were shaped by the same evolutionary forces, the same incredible expansion of the mind that shaped all of us. Their experience isn't some personal failing. It's not a weakness of character. It's a reflection of something fundamental about human consciousness itself. Its power, yes, but also its inherent fragility. It's a vulnerability we all potentially share, just expressed more profoundly in some. So if this evolutionary perspective holds true, if schizophrenia is, in part, the cost of our species' intelligence, what does that mean for us? What's our responsibility to those who bear that cost most heavily?
That question really hits home, doesn't it? Because today, let's be honest, far too many people experiencing schizophrenia are failed by our systems. They might end up homeless or institutionalized without real therapeutic care, or just isolated, suffering alone. Their potential is lost, their stories ignored, but it doesn't have to be that way. They aren't lost causes. With the right kind of support, when people are actually seen and heard and valued for who they are, they can live meaningful lives, contribute amazing things. And maybe, just maybe, they can teach the rest of us something vital about the limits and the sheer potential of this human mind we all inhabit. We really need empathy, not fear. We need real investment in care and research, not neglect. We need community, not isolation. We have to stop seeing schizophrenia as just this scary problem to be hidden away, and maybe start seeing it as, well, as a difficult truth, a truth about us, a reminder that these brilliant minds of ours, they're delicate. And some people, through absolutely no fault of their own, walk a much thinner, much more precarious line between imagination and reality than others. We owe them more than just basic survival. We owe them dignity. We owe them support. We owe them inclusion. Because they are, in a profound and often heartbreaking way, both the price and the living proof of what it truly means to be human.